The broken arrival. The rain fell like tears from the sky as Emma stumbled through the iron gates of Thornwood Manor. Her clothes were torn, her body covered in bruises that told stories she wished she could forget. Blood dripped from a cut above her eye, mixing with the rain that washed down her pale face. She had nowhere else to go. No family, no friends, no hope left in her heart. The massive stone mansion stood before her like a sleeping giant. Dark windows stared down at her like empty eyes. This place belonged to Alexander Thornwood, the man everyone feared. They called him the Ice King because his heart was said to be frozen solid. He had built an empire through ruthless business deals and showed mercy to no one. Emma collapsed on the front steps, her legs finally giving up. She didn't care anymore if she lived or died. After what happened 3 months ago, death seemed like a kind friend rather than an enemy. The heavy door suddenly opened. Warm light spilled onto the wet stone steps. A tall figure appeared in the doorway, his broad shoulders blocking out the light behind him. Alexander Thornwood looked down at the broken girl on his steps with eyes as dark as midnight. "Please," Emma whispered, her voice barely audible over the rain. "Just let me rest here for one night. I'll leave in the morning. I promise." Alexander studied her for a long moment. His jaw was strong and sharp, his face showing no emotion. But something in her eyes made him pause. He had seen many desperate people in his life, but this girl looked like she had crawled through hell itself. "Come inside," he said, his voice deep and cold as winter wind. "You'll catch your death out here." Shadows of the past. 3 months earlier, Emma's life had been completely different. She had been engaged to Marcus Cole, the son of one of the wealthiest families in the city. Everyone said they were the perfect couple. Emma believed she had found her forever love. But love can be the cruelest lie of all. She remembered that terrible night as clearly as if it were happening right now. She had come home early from visiting her sick mother, wanting to surprise Marcus with his favorite dinner. Instead, she found him in their bedroom with her best friend Sarah. The betrayal cut deeper than any knife could. But that wasn't the worst part. When Emma confronted them, Marcus didn't apologize. He laughed. He told her she was too boring, too simple, too nothing for a man like him. Sarah, the friend who had held Emma's hand through every difficult moment, just smiled coldly. "Did you really think someone like Marcus would truly love someone like you?" Sarah had asked, her words dripping with poison. "You were just convenient. A placeholder until something better came along." Emma had run from that house with her heart in pieces. But Marcus and Sarah weren't done destroying her. They spread lies throughout the city, claiming Emma had been unfaithful, that she was mentally unstable, that she had stolen money from Marcus's family. Within weeks, Emma lost her job, her apartment, and her reputation. Even her own mother, weak from illness, had turned her away, believing the lies. Now, sitting in a luxurious bathroom inside Thornwood Manor, Emma stared at her reflection in the mirror. She barely recognized the hollow-eyed girl looking back at her. The physical wounds would heal, but the scars on her soul felt permanent. A gentle knock interrupted her dark thoughts. "Miss Emma," a kind voice called. "I've prepared some clean clothes for you, and the master says dinner will be ready in 20 minutes. The voice belonged to Mrs. Chun, the elderly housekeeper who had helped Emma to this bathroom. Her wrinkled face had shown only kindness, asking no questions about Emma's injuries or her situation. An unlikely encounter. The dining room was enormous, with a table long enough to seat 20 people. But only 2 places were set, one at each end. Emma sat nervously in her borrowed clothes, a simple but elegant dress that Mrs. Chun had provided. Her wet hair was wrapped in a towel, and she kept her eyes on her empty plate. Alexander entered the room like a storm, his presence filling every corner. He wore a black shirt with the sleeves rolled up, revealing strong forearms. His dark hair was slightly messy, as if he had run his fingers through it many times. He sat at the opposite end of the long table and studied Emma with those unreadable eyes. "Eat," he commanded as servants brought plates of food. "You look like you haven't had a proper meal in days." Emma's stomach growled, betraying her hunger. She hadn't eaten anything but scraps for nearly a week. But pride made her hesitate. She didn't want to seem desperate even though she was. "I'm not hungry," she lied, her voice small. Alexander's lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. You're a terrible liar. He stood up, took his plate, and moved to sit directly across from her instead of at the far end. Up close, Emma could see that his eyes weren't completely black. They were a very dark brown like rich coffee with tiny flecks of gold. I don't accept charity well, Emma admitted, her cheeks flushing with embarrassment. This isn't charity, Alexander replied, cutting into his food. Consider it payment. You've given me something interesting to look at on a boring evening. Emma didn't know if she should be insulted or amused. She decided to eat instead. The food was delicious, the best thing she had tasted in months. As she ate, she felt Alexander's eyes on her, watching her every move. What happened to you? He asked suddenly, his voice gentler than before. Emma's fork froze halfway to her mouth. I don't want to talk about it. Fair enough. Alexander leaned back in his chair. But you should know that people who show up at my door usually want something. What do you want, Emma? How did he know her name? Emma's eyes widened. I never told you my name. Alexander pulled out his phone and showed her a news article. Emma's face stared back at her from the screen. The headline read, Missing woman wanted for questioning in theft case. Her stomach turned to ice. That's not true, Emma said quickly, panic rising in her chest. I didn't steal anything. They're lying. Marcus and Sarah, they made it all up to destroy me. I know, Alexander said calmly, putting his phone away. I had my people investigate the moment I saw your face. The evidence against you is fabricated. Quite poorly, I might add. Emma felt tears burning behind her eyes. Then why? Why are they doing this to me? Because hurting people makes them feel powerful, Alexander said, his voice turning cold and hard. Some people are like vampires. They feed on others' pain. Walls built high. 3 days passed. Emma stayed in a beautiful guest room with windows overlooking a garden that bloomed even in the rain. Mrs. Chun brought her meals and clothes. A doctor came to treat her injuries. But Emma barely left her room. She was afraid that if she ventured out, she would discover this was all a dream. On the 4th day, Alexander knocked on her door. Come with me, he said when she opened it. I want to show you something. He led her through the mansion to a room she hadn't seen before. It was a library, but unlike any library Emma had ever imagined. Books lined the walls from floor to ceiling. A fireplace crackled with warm flames. Comfortable chairs invited people to sit and read for hours. This is my favorite place in the house, Alexander said, running his fingers along the spines of old books. When the world becomes too cruel, I hide here. Emma walked slowly around the room, touching the books gently. I used to love reading, she said quietly, before everything fell apart. What stopped you? Alexander asked. I stopped believing in happy endings, Emma replied, her voice breaking. Stories always promise that good people win and bad people lose. But that's not how real life works. Alexander moved closer to her. He was so tall that Emma had to tilt her head back to look at his face. You're right, he said. Real life doesn't give us easy happy endings. But it does give us chances to write new stories. I don't know how to start over, Emma whispered. I don't even know who I am anymore. They took everything from me. My reputation, my confidence, my ability to trust. What's left? Alexander reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away. When she didn't move, he gently lifted her chin with his finger. You're still here, he said. Still breathing, still fighting to survive. That's everything. For the first time in months, Emma felt something other than pain. It was small and fragile, like a tiny flame in a dark room. But it was there. Hope. First crack in the armor. That night Emma couldn't sleep. She walked through the quiet mansion until she found herself in the garden. The rain had stopped and stars filled the sky like diamonds scattered across black velvet. She sat on a stone bench, wrapping her arms around herself against the cool night air. Couldn't sleep either? Alexander's voice came from behind her. Emma jumped slightly. You move very quietly for such a large man. One of my few talents, he said, sitting beside her on the bench. He draped his jacket over her shoulders without asking. It smelled like him, a mixture of expensive cologne and something uniquely his own. Why are you helping me? Emma asked the question that had been burning in her mind. You don't know me. I could be exactly what the news says I am. Alexander was quiet for a long time, staring up at the stars. 5 years ago, he finally said. Someone I loved very much was destroyed by lies and cruelty. I watched her fade away until there was nothing left but shadows. She died believing she was worthless, believing the terrible things people said about her. Emma's heart ached at the pain in his voice. I'm sorry. Her name was Lily. She was my younger sister. Alexander's jaw tightened. I was too young, too powerless to protect her then. I built this empire, this fortress, this cold reputation so I would never be powerless again. So I could protect people who needed protecting. Is that why they call you the Ice King? Emma asked softly. Alexander smiled, but it was sad. People fear what they don't understand. They think my heart is frozen. But the truth is, I keep it locked away where it can't be used to hurt anyone I care about. Emma turned to look at him fully. In the moonlight, Alexander looked different. Less frightening, more human. Thank you, she said, for seeing me when everyone else chose to look away. Emma, Alexander said, his voice rough with emotion, I need you to understand something. I can give you shelter, protection, resources to rebuild your life. But I can't give you back what they stole from you. That's something only you can reclaim. I don't know if I'm strong enough, Emma admitted. Alexander stood and offered her his hand. Then let me teach you how to be strong. Let me show you that revenge isn't about destroying your enemies. It's about becoming so powerful, so successful, so happy that their lies become meaningless. Emma looked at his outstretched hand. Taking it meant trusting again, risking again, hoping again. Everything inside her screamed that it was too dangerous. But that tiny flame of hope flickered a little brighter. She placed her hand in his. His fingers closed around hers, warm and steady and sure. Okay, she whispered. Teach me. As they walked back to the mansion together, Emma didn't know that this moment would change everything. She didn't know that Alexander Thornwood, the man with the frozen heart, was beginning to melt. And she certainly didn't know that Marcus and Sarah's cruelty was about to come back to haunt them in ways they never imagined. The broken girl who had collapsed on the steps was beginning to transform. And from her ashes, something powerful was starting to rise. Learning to trust again. Morning sunlight poured through Emma's bedroom window like liquid gold. For the first time in months, she woke up without fear gripping her throat. The mansion was quiet except for the distant sounds of birds singing in the garden. Emma stretched carefully, her healing body still tender in places, and made a decision. Today she would stop hiding. She found Alexander in his study, surrounded by papers and computer screens. He looked up when she entered, and Emma noticed the dark circles under his eyes. The man barely seemed to sleep. I want to work, Emma announced, standing straighter than she had in weeks. I can't just live here doing nothing. Let me earn my keep. Alexander leaned back in his leather chair, studying her with those intense eyes. What did you do before? Before everything fell apart. I was an art curator, Emma said, feeling a pang of loss. I worked at the Morrison Gallery. I helped organize exhibitions, worked with artists, made beautiful things accessible to people who needed beauty in their lives. Her voice grew softer. Marcus said it was a silly job, that I should do something more practical. Marcus was an idiot, Alexander said bluntly. Do you still love art? Emma thought about it. So much of her past life felt contaminated by Marcus's opinions, his subtle criticisms that had slowly eaten away at her confidence. But art had been hers before she ever met him. Yes, she said firmly. I do. Alexander smiled, a real smile that transformed his stern face. Good, because I have a proposal for you. He stood and walked to a large painting on the wall, pulling it aside to reveal a safe. Inside were stacks of documents. He pulled out a folder and handed it to Emma. I recently acquired a building downtown, he explained. I was planning to turn it into office space, but looking at you now, I have a better idea. What if we turned it into an art gallery? Your art gallery. Emma's hands trembled as she opened the folder. Inside were photographs of a beautiful old building with huge windows and high ceilings. It was perfect for displaying art. But doubt crept in immediately. I can't accept this, she said, trying to hand the folder back. It's too much. I haven't done anything to deserve. Stop, Alexander interrupted, his voice gentle but firm. This isn't charity, Emma. This is an investment. I believe you have talent and vision. I'm betting that you'll make this gallery successful. In return, I get a percentage of the profits. That's business, not charity. Emma looked from the photographs to Alexander's face. He believed in her. This powerful, successful man who could have anyone working for him was choosing to believe in her. The broken, accused, homeless girl that everyone else had abandoned. Okay, she whispered, clutching the folder to her chest. But I have one condition. Alexander raised an eyebrow. What's that? Teach me to be strong like you, Emma said. Not just in business but in everything. I don't want to be a victim anymore. I want to be the kind of person who fights back. Something flickered in Alexander's eyes. Pride maybe, or recognition. Every morning at 6, he said. Meet me in the gym. We start tomorrow. Secrets unveiled. The next morning, Emma discovered that Alexander's idea of training was brutal. The mansion's private gym was filled with equipment that looked like torture devices. Alexander, wearing simple workout clothes, looked even more intimidating than he did in his business suits. First lesson, he said, tossing her a jump rope. Strength comes from discipline. Every day, whether you feel like it or not, you show up and do the work. For 2 hours, Alexander pushed Emma harder than she'd ever been pushed. When she wanted to quit, he encouraged her to continue. When she fell, he helped her up. And when she finally completed the workout, tears streaming down her face from exhaustion, he handed her a bottle of water and smiled. You're stronger than you think, he said. You just forgot. The weeks that followed fell into a rhythm. Mornings were for physical training. Afternoons were spent renovating the gallery space and connecting with artists. Evenings, Emma and Alexander would have dinner together, talking about art, business, and life. Slowly, carefully, they were building something neither of them had expected. Friendship. But one evening everything changed. Emma was working late at the gallery when her phone rang. The number was blocked. Against her better judgment, she answered. Hello, Emma. Sarah's voice poured through the phone like poison. Did you think you could hide forever? Emma's blood turned to ice. How did you get this number? Oh, Emma, Sarah laughed. Did you really think Marcus and I didn't know where you've been? We've known for weeks that you're living with Alexander Thornwood. How convenient. You always did know how to land on your feet, didn't you? What do you want? Emma asked, her voice shaking despite her efforts to sound strong. I'm calling to warn you, Sarah said, her voice dropping to something cold and cruel. Marcus has been talking to some very important people. People who believe our story about you stealing from his family. There's going to be an arrest warrant issued soon. Even your precious Ice King won't be able to protect you from that. The call ended, leaving Emma staring at her phone in horror. She had been so focused on building her new life that she'd forgotten her enemies were still out there, still plotting her destruction. She called Alexander immediately. He arrived at the gallery within 10 minutes, his face dark with anger when she told him about Sarah's call. They're escalating, he said grimly, which means they're scared. They've seen you rebuilding your life, and it threatens them. What do I do? Emma asked, feeling her newfound strength starting to crumble. Alexander took her hands in his touch warm and reassuring. We fight back. But first, I need to tell you something I've been keeping from you. Emma's heart raced. What? I've been investigating Marcus and Sarah since the day you arrived, Alexander admitted. I have people who are very good at finding secrets. And Emma, they found something big. He pulled out his phone and showed her a series of documents. Emma's eyes widened as she read. Bank transfers, emails, text messages. The evidence was damning. Marcus has been embezzling money from his own family's company, Alexander explained. Sarah has been helping him hide the evidence. They framed you for theft to cover their own crimes. If they could make everyone believe you were a thief, no one would listen if you tried to expose them. Emma felt like she'd been punched in the stomach. The betrayal went even deeper than she'd thought. Why didn't you tell me sooner? Because I wanted you to find your strength first, Alexander said. I wanted you to rebuild yourself before we tore them down. Revenge is only satisfying when you're strong enough to enjoy it. The enemy returns. The following week, everything exploded. Emma and Alexander were at a charity gala. One of the first public events Emma had attended since her world fell apart. She wore a stunning red dress that Alexander had insisted on buying for her. And for the first time in months, she felt beautiful. Then she saw them, Marcus and Sarah, walking through the crowd like they owned the world. Marcus looked exactly as Emma remembered. Handsome in a cold, artificial way, with blonde hair perfectly styled and a smile that never reached his eyes. Sarah clung to his arm, wearing diamonds that Emma recognized as ones Marcus had promised to give Emma. Their eyes met across the room. Emma saw surprise flash across Marcus's face, followed quickly by anger. He whispered something to Sarah, and they began walking toward Emma and Alexander. "Well, well," Marcus said when he reached them. His voice was smooth as silk, but his eyes were sharp as knives. "Emma, I heard you'd found a new benefactor. Though I have to say, I'm surprised even you would stoop this low." Alexander's hand tightened on Emma's waist. She could feel the tension in his body, like a predator ready to strike. But she put her hand on his arm, stopping him. This was her battle to fight. "Hello, Marcus," Emma said, her voice steady. "Still lying to everyone about who you really are?" Marcus's smile faltered. "Careful, Emma. Making accusations against me won't end well for you. I have lawyers who would be very interested in your whereabouts. And I have evidence that would be very interesting to the police," Emma replied, lifting her chin. "Tell me, Marcus, how long did you think you could steal from your own family before someone noticed?" The color drained from Marcus's face. Beside him, Sarah's eyes went wide with panic. "I don't know what you're talking about," Marcus said, but his voice had lost its confidence. "Don't you?" Alexander spoke for the first time, his voice cold as ice. "Because I have bank records, email trails, and testimony from 3 of your former employees that suggest otherwise. Would you like me to share them with everyone here? I'm sure your father would be particularly interested." Emma watched as fear replaced the arrogance in Marcus's eyes. This was the man who had broken her heart, destroyed her reputation, and tried to ruin her life. And now he was the one who looked broken. But as she stared at him, Emma realized something surprising. She didn't feel the satisfaction she'd expected. Instead, she just felt tired. Tired of anger, tired of pain, tired of letting these people control her emotions. "Actually," Emma said quietly, "I don't want to do this here. You're not worth making a scene over." She turned to walk away, but Sarah grabbed her arm. "You think you've won?" Sarah hissed. "You think just because you've got a rich man protecting you that you're better than us? You're still just plain boring, Emma. Nothing special. Nothing worth keeping." Emma looked at Sarah's hand on her arm, then slowly lifted her eyes to meet Sarah's gaze. And she smiled. It was a real smile full of genuine amusement. "You know what, Sarah?" Emma said softly. "You're right. I'm just Emma. But I'm not the Emma you knew anymore. I'm the Emma who survived your worst. I'm the Emma who rebuilt herself from ashes. I'm the Emma who learned that my worth isn't determined by people like you." She gently removed Sarah's hand from her arm. "And honestly, that makes me more special than you could ever understand." As Emma walked away with Alexander beside her, she heard Marcus calling after her, his voice desperate now. "Emma, wait. We can talk about this. We can make a deal." But Emma didn't look back. She was done looking backward, rising from ashes. The next morning, Emma woke to find Alexander already up, standing by her bedroom window. The sun was rising, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. "You were incredible last night," he said without turning around. "The way you handled them, the strength you showed. That was remarkable." Emma joined him at the window, standing close enough that their shoulders almost touched. "I couldn't have done it without you." "Yes, you could have," Alexander said, finally turning to look at her. "I just gave you a safe place to remember who you really are. The strength was always yours." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the sunrise. Then Alexander spoke again, his voice quieter, more vulnerable than Emma had ever heard it. "I need to tell you something," he said. "About Lily." About what really happened to her. Emma waited, sensing that this was important. She fell in love with someone who promised her everything, Alexander continued. He was charming, successful, perfect on the surface. But behind closed doors he was cruel. He slowly isolated her from everyone who loved her. He convinced her that she was worthless, that no one else would ever want her. Emma's heart ached for the sister Alexander had lost. By the time I realized what was happening, it was too late, Alexander said, his voice thick with emotion. She believed his lies so completely that when he finally left her, she couldn't see a reason to keep living. She took her own life and His voice broke. I wasn't there to save her. Emma took his hand, squeezing it tightly. It wasn't your fault. I know that in my head, Alexander said. But my heart still carries the guilt. That's why I built these walls around myself. Why I became the Ice King. If I never loved anyone, I would never have to fail anyone again. But you saved me, Emma whispered. Alexander looked at her then. Really looked at her, and Emma saw something in his eyes that made her breath catch. It wasn't just friendship or compassion. It was something deeper, more dangerous, more real. I didn't save you, he said softly. You saved yourself. But watching you fight, watching you rise from the ashes of what they did to you, you saved me too. You reminded me that walls might keep out pain, but they also keep out life. They were standing very close now. Emma could feel the heat radiating from Alexander's body, could smell his scent, could see the way his chest rose and fell with each breath. Alexander, she breathed. Emma, he replied, his voice rough. Tell me to stop and I will. Don't stop, she whispered. He kissed her then, and it was nothing like the kisses Emma remembered from Marcus. This wasn't about possession or control. This was about two broken people finding wholeness in each other. It was gentle and fierce, tender and passionate, everything and nothing like Emma had imagined. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Emma smiled. A real, genuine, joy-filled smile. I think I'm falling in love with you, she admitted. Alexander touched her face gently, his thumb tracing her cheekbone. I know I'm falling in love with you. And it terrifies me. Good, Emma said, laughing. You terrify me too. Let's be terrified together. Love or revenge. But their happiness was short-lived. 2 days later, Emma received a message that changed everything. It was from Marcus's father, Richard Cole. He wanted to meet with her privately, no lawyers, no Alexander, just the two of them. Emma showed the message to Alexander, who immediately shook his head. It's a trap. Don't go. What if it's not? Emma asked. What if he wants to make things right? Men like Richard Cole don't make things right, Alexander said firmly. They make deals that benefit themselves. But Emma couldn't shake the feeling that she needed to hear what Richard had to say. Against Alexander's wishes, she agreed to meet him at a neutral location. A quiet cafe on the edge of town. Richard Cole was older than Emma expected, with silver hair and tired eyes. He stood when she entered, offering his hand formally. Thank you for coming, he said as they sat down. I know you have no reason to trust me. You're right, Emma said. I don't. Richard sighed, looking older than his years. My son has been lying to me for months. Years probably. I refuse to see it because he's my son. But I can't ignore the evidence Mr. Thornwood has compiled. Then why am I here? Emma asked. Because I want to offer you a deal, Richard said, leaning forward. Drop the charges against Marcus, let this whole thing disappear, and I'll give you $5 million. You can start over anywhere in the world, no scandal, no trial, no more pain. Emma stared at him in disbelief. You want me to let him get away with everything he did to me? For money. I want to protect my family, Richard said. Is that so hard to understand? Marcus made mistakes, but he's still my son. He didn't make mistakes, Emma said, her voice rising. He deliberately destroyed my life. He turned me into a homeless, hunted person who wanted to die. And you want me to just forget that? $5 million, Richard repeated. Think about what you could do with that money. Think about the freedom it would give you. For a moment Emma was tempted. $5 million could change everything. She could travel, start new businesses, never worry about money again. She could leave all of this behind and truly start fresh. But then she thought about Lily, Alexander's sister, who had believed the lies told about her until they killed her. She thought about how many other people Marcus and Sarah might hurt if they weren't stopped. And she thought about the woman she had become, the woman who had learned to fight back. "No," Emma said firmly, standing up. "Keep your money. Some things are worth more than wealth. Like justice. Like truth. Like my own self-respect." Richard's face darkened. "You're making a mistake. Marcus has powerful friends. They won't let this go to trial. They'll destroy you all over again."